Welcome to the world of Deeptech. In this video, we will continue our discussion on valuation that we started in our previous video. There, we looked at the factors that impact the startup's valuation and the non-financial attributes of a startup that early stage and seed stage investors look for while making investment decisions. Here, we will look at quantitative valuation of a startup from an equity investment perspective. Ideally, the valuation method should be forward-looking, consider different scenarios of evolution of the startup, take company-specific unique attributes into consideration, and take care of different risks explicitly. The most popular method for valuing a startup or any asset is the discounted cash flow method. It determines the value of the asset based on the free cash flows that can be generated over time and discounting those cash flows using a discount rate that accounts for the risks inherent in them. Let's look at it in some detail. If we look at the costs within the company, the first one is cost of goods sold. This is the direct cost attributable to the product and its delivery. The next layer of costs are operating expenses that include sales and general administration, R&D costs if they are expensed, depreciation of capital assets, and any other costs that are incurred during routine operation of the firm. The next layer includes interest on debt, taxes, and any one-off expenses incurred by the company. If the revenue of the firm is more than all these costs, then the firm's net income or profit after taxes is positive. If the revenue of the firm is less than these costs, then the firm's net income or profit after tax is negative. From this net income, you deduct reinvestment of cash back into the business and any cash outflows for repayment of debt to arrive at the free cash flows to equity investors. If this free cash flow is negative, more investment is needed. If it is positive, it can be potentially returned to the investors in the form of dividends or share buybacks. The free cash flows of a startup look something like this. We can't keep projecting into the future ad infinitum, and firms can't keep growing like that either. So, we assume a forecast period over which the company grows rapidly. Beyond this, the firm is assumed to achieve stable growth rate into the future. This growth rate is used to determine the terminal value. The free cash flows over the forecast period and the terminal value are discounted back to the present value using a discount rate that takes care of the risk profile of the company. In reality, the prediction of whether the free cash flows follow this trend or this, or determining when the forecast period of rapid growth ends is based on a number of assumptions. Similarly, the growth rate at steady state is hard to predict and is generally estimated based on industry average growth rates. The biggest challenge with DCF is the estimation of the discount rate used to discount the future cash flows. Let's relook at the different kinds of risks associated with an advanced technology startup we discussed in our previous video. While some of these risks are continuous, some of them, like regulatory approvals, are discrete, and all these risks change over the evolution of the startup. Also, most of the value of the startup is in the terminal value, which is very sensitive to the growth rate, and as we saw earlier, the best estimate for this is the industry growth rate, which may or may not apply to advanced technology startups. So, instead of going through developing a full-fledged DCF model, some investors use an alternate method to arrive at the pre-money valuation of the startup. Here, instead of free cash flows, net income is forecast for a period of 3 to 5 years, and the last net income in the forecast period is multiplied by the price-earning ratio of the industry to arrive at a pre-money valuation of the startup at the end of the forecast period. This value is then discounted back to the present value using rates that are commensurate with the risk at each stage of the investment. But what if you still need to generate DCF based valuation? Where do you start? There are two ways to go about it. The first one is the top-down approach, where you start with the size of the serviceable obtainable market and estimate the revenue growth over a 3 to 5 year time horizon. Then you use industry average percentages to arrive at allocations for cost of goods sold and operating expenses. The discount rate is also calculated based on industry averages adjusted for higher risk and any other unique characteristics of the startup. The second approach is the bottom-up approach, where you start with your bill of materials, production capacity, and other direct and indirect expenses for the cost and estimate the revenue growth over the 3 to 5 year time horizon using the size of the serviceable obtainable market. The discount rate is calculated based on adjusted industry averages as discussed earlier. Clearly, DCF-based approaches are better models to build for later stage investments. At earlier stages, investors tend to either use rules of thumb or PE multiples we saw earlier. They also use instruments like SAFE or iSafe notes that postpone the discussion on valuation till later rounds. Going back to the attributes of an ideal valuation method, we see that both DCF and PE multiples method are forward-looking. The methods allow us to incorporate discrete uncertainties in the startup by building different scenarios. But other scenarios, such as delays and overruns, are harder to capture in these models. Most of the parameters used in the model, such as forecast period and terminal growth rate, are based on industry averages, and very little firm-specific information is captured explicitly. Similarly, there is no explicit way to capture the risks in the startup. These characteristics of current quantitative techniques lead to lengthy and complex negotiations to arrive at the valuation and terms of the agreement. There are several methods currently under development but not widely used in the industry to address these challenges. We will discuss those in our future videos. In spite of the inaccuracies, the process of building the financial model itself can help the entrepreneurs. It can help them identify the known unknowns and assumptions that they need to validate. It will also help them prioritize their task list and reduce the overall risk of the venture. To summarize, we looked at the key elements of valuing a company using DCF and some of the challenges there. We also looked at a few practical techniques for using DCF and simpler techniques like PE ratios for valuing the company. We will stop here for now. Before you go, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Thank you.